you still brace before spending. Even now, small comforts can feel suspicious instead of simple. A dinner out, a softer mattress, the nicer shampoo. Something in you whispers that wanting more is dangerous. The feeling isn't greed. It's money anxiety wearing a quiet face, showing up as hesitation, guilt, and second guessing. You may look responsible to everyone else. Inside, spending can still feel like stepping onto thin ice. And that tension has a history. By the end, you'll understand why your body still treats money carefully. Because growing up with less teaches more than frugality. It teaches safety and what danger resembles. When money was tight, you learned to scan. Prices, moods, overdue notices, little changes in adults' voices. That hyper-awareness often survives the shortage itself. The bills change, but your nervous system keeps the old assignment. So you don't just buy a coat, you calculate 3 backup plans, then feel bad for needing warmth. That's the first hidden truth. For many people, money stress isn't about math first, it's about memory. Maybe your childhood had grocery math. Maybe lights stayed off in empty rooms like they were expensive company. Maybe a parent sighed before every checkout. Maybe you learned that costs were not numbers, but emotional weather. Even if nobody explained it directly, you noticed. Children become experts at reading what adults cannot calmly say. You learned what made the room tense. A broken appliance, an unexpected fee, a request that sounded small. So your mind treats spending like risk detection. It doesn't ask, can I afford this? Only, is this safe? That's why purchases can trigger oversized feelings. The price is current, but the alarm was set long ago. You might earn more than your parents ever did. Still, your stomach can tighten over replacing worn-out shoes. Or you research a household item for days, not because it's irresponsible, but because choosing feels strangely loaded. Growing up with less can make every purchase feel symbolic. Money stops being money and becomes character, safety, permission. Spend too easily, and part of you fears becoming careless. Spend too slowly, and life starts feeling postponed. This is why people from scarcity backgrounds can seem contradictory. They save intensely, then occasionally spend with emotion. Sometimes the splurge isn't about the object. It's about briefly escaping the exhausting job of always being careful. But relief bought under pressure rarely feels clean. Pleasure gets followed by guilt because the old alarm returns. Then you promise yourself to do better. Usually that means tighter control, not deeper understanding of what's happening. And control can look virtuous from the outside. Yet inside it often feels like never fully exhaling. You may struggle when things are stable. Calm can feel unfamiliar if your first lessons linked money with tension. Part of you keeps preparing for the drop. You save, delay, overthink, and still never quite feel ready. Because readiness in this pattern isn't a number. It's a feeling of enoughness that scarcity often interrupted early. When you grew up around not enough, enough became slippery. It moved farther away every time fear moved closer. So even success may not land properly. Your circumstances improve, but your inner forecast still predicts sudden storms. This shows up in ordinary moments. Standing in a store, you hear yourself say, maybe later, to basic things. Or you open the banking app at night, not to plan, just to calm the low hum inside. You are not being dramatic. Your mind is checking for safety the way other people check locked doors. And sometimes the shame hits before the purchase even happens. You feel guilty for wanting before spending anything. That's an important clue. The discomfort isn't only about losing money, it's about what desire once seemed to cost. In many homes with less, wanting had consequences. It could spark worry, arguments, silence, or that look of strain. So you may have learned to want quietly, to edit yourself before anyone else had to say no. That habit can follow you into adulthood beautifully disguised. It calls itself practicality while secretly trimming your aliveness. You buy the plain version without asking why. You leave comfort on the shelf to avoid an old feeling. Or you postpone celebrating milestones because it feels excessive. Pleasure gets treated like a luxury, not a human experience. This isn't because you lack discipline. It's because discipline may have once been the family language of survival, and survival languages are hard to outgrow. They keep sounding wise even when life no longer needs them. Another quiet effect is over-responsibility. You may feel guilty relaxing when there is still something practical to handle. Money becomes proof of being good. Careful means worthy. Prepared means lovable. Needing less means safer to keep. But here's what makes this so confusing. The pattern can bring competence while also starving tenderness toward yourself. People may praise how grounded you are. They don't see the private negotiations happening over socks, takeout, and rest. Sometimes scarcity leaves you waiting for permission. Permission to replace, to enjoy, to stop proving you can endure. And endurance can become an identity. If struggles shaped your early worth, ease may feel oddly undeserved. That is why receiving can feel harder than earning. Work has familiar rules, but comfort can feel emotionally exposed. You might dismiss your stability quickly, because trusting good seasons can feel risky when you've seen them vanish. So instead of enjoying enough, you monitor it. You look for leaks, threats, mistakes, reasons it might disappear. The mind believes vigilance prevents pain, but constant vigilance also prevents rest, and rest is what scarcity stole first. This is where many people blame themselves unfairly. They call it irrational, weak, stingy, dramatic, or just weird. But your pattern makes sense in context. It once helped, even if it now interrupts the life you want. If this feels familiar, pause for a moment. What situation makes your chest tighten faster than it should? Maybe it's groceries. Maybe replacing something broken. Maybe it's seeing your own wants and instantly trying to reduce them. If a moment comes to mind, say it in the comments. Your honesty may help someone feel less alone. And notice what story sits underneath that moment. Not the price, but the meaning your body attaches to it. Because beneath today's money habits is often yesterday's emotional rule. Spend carefully, stay small, expect loss, don't burden anyone. Those rules rarely sound loud. They operate quietly, like a blueprint you inherited before you could question it. And the blueprint affects more than spending. It can shape earning, asking, negotiating, how much ease you allow. If deep down money feels temporary, you may under-enjoy it or over-cling to it when life invites movement. If deep down money feels emotionally heavy, you may avoid looking. Avoidance then creates more tension, not less. If deep down money feels tied to goodness, any misstep feels moral. A mistake becomes proof, not information. This is why logical advice often doesn't fully land. You cannot out-budget a fear that was learned relationally. The issue is not intelligence. It's that your body may still treat money like an emotional weather report. More specifically, it may track money for signs of belonging. Am I safe, approved, responsible, impossible to resent? When children sense financial strain, they often personalize it. They become easier, quieter, lower maintenance, trying not to add weight. That strategy can look mature very early. Later, it becomes someone who struggles to include themselves in the equation. You may plan for emergencies and forget ordinary joy. Not because joy is foolish, but because it felt optional. Or you equate being low maintenance with being lovable. So your needs shrink first whenever money enters the room. This can even affect relationships now. You may hide wants, hide worries, or resent others for spending freely. Not because their spending is wrong, but because it touches the place where freedom and fear got knotted together. Sometimes you judge yourself for not being over it, but old scarcity doesn't disappear simply because your paycheck changed. The body trusts repetition more than reason. It believes what happened many times, especially when no one explained it. So healing begins less with forcing, more with noticing. Noticing the flinch, the guilt, the instant urge to shrink. Noticing without marking yourself changes the pattern faster. Shame keeps old lessons locked in place. Curiosity loosens them. Curiosity asks a very different question. Not what's wrong with me, but what did this help me survive? That question brings compassion back into the room. And compassion is the first thing scarcity trained you to skip. Once compassion appears, choice becomes possible. Not huge, dramatic choice, just the kind that doesn't come from panic. You start seeing that guilt is not guidance. It's an old echo arriving on time, but from another year. You start noticing that delaying everything is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is fear wearing a sensible outfit. And you begin separating protection from punishment. Protection cares for you. Punishment keeps proving you can go without. That distinction matters more than it seems. Many scarcity habits survive because punishment has been mistaken for responsibility. Responsibility is steady and respectful. Punishment is tight, suspicious, and secretly proud of how little it needs. If you grew up with less, you may admire self-denial. It can look noble because it once protected everyone. But constantly withholding from yourself has a cost. It teaches your mind that your comfort is always negotiable. And what is always negotiable rarely feels secure. You keep becoming the expense that is easiest to cut. That's why this pattern feels so personal. Money touches survival, but it also touches visibility, worth, and permission. When those themes got tangled early, adult finances carry extra emotion. Simple decisions start feeling like identity decisions. The deeper shift comes when you stop arguing with the feeling. Instead, you learn to translate what it says. Tightness might mean this reminds me of uncertainty. Guilt might mean I learned wanting made life harder. Overthinking might mean choosing carried consequences. Avoidance might mean numbers became linked with fear before they meant agency. Translation softens the inner battle. Suddenly the habit looks less like sabotage and more like a leftover protector. And protectors can be thanked without staying in charge. That is very different from shaming them into hiding. Maybe the next honest step is simple. When guilt appears, notice whether it arrived before any real harm did. When fear appears, ask what age it feels. Sometimes your reaction is current in size but ancient in tone. That tiny pause doesn't erase the imprint overnight, but it interrupts the automatic merge between money and danger. And every interruption teaches something new. It tells your mind that awareness can lead, not only alarm. Enough may start feeling less theoretical. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you stop abandoning yourself first. You may still love caution, and that's okay. The goal isn't becoming careless. It's becoming calmer inside care. You may still plan ahead, compare prices, think twice. But eventually, those actions can come from respect, not fear. Because being shaped by less is not a flaw. It is a history your nervous system learned very well. And histories can be understood without being repeated forever. Understanding is often the first safe place change can begin. So if you recognize yourself here, be gentle tonight. You are adapting, not failing, when these habits first formed. The first real shift is this compassionate honesty. This came from somewhere, and it doesn't have to run everything. If one part landed deeply, tell me which part. Your words might name something another person has never articulated. And if this kind of insight helps you breathe easier, subscribe. Turn on the bell for more. Not because you need fixing, because understanding your patterns can make everyday money moments feel lighter and less lonely. You learned these feelings before you had language. Now you have language, and that changes what comes next. Less shaped you, but it doesn't define you. The old fear can speak without making every decision. And maybe that is real wealth. Not perfect certainty, just a quieter body when money enters the room.